ZZ Top was three guys that really liked to play. That's really the cornerstone of what does it for us.
Our first inclination is to throw the instruction manual away.
We never know exactly what we're going to be doing. We never know exactly what we're doing. If you stay tuned, it'll be coming your way. The very first time the three of us played a song together, we played a shuffle that lasted for hours. When Frank counted it off until we ended it, it was wonderful, you know. So the combination was there from the beginning.
When the playing began, we knew that there was something that seemed to feel right. It was a logical magnetism. Even though I started playing about when I was 13, my troubles didn't really start until I met these guys.
The first time I heard Billy play, and this was long after his band, the Moving Sidewalks, had been very big in Houston and Texas, and Dusty and my band, the American Blues, had been big up around Dallas ways, and both made records and everything. But I'd never seen Billy play, and the first time I saw him play, it was like the feeling of finding someone that was like a missing. You didn't know they were missing until you saw them, and then you thought, wow.
We've all known each other through the Texas connection, and it was instantaneous. We played for half a day, and went and got some sleep, came back, played another half a day, went out and got some Mexican food, played on into that night, and it's been going for quite a while now.
I'd say the first 3 years, the opening song was always Shuffle and See. It's our favorite tempo. I think some of our most noteworthy songs have been in that tempo. Cush, LaGrange, My Head's in Mississippi.
The shuffle's a cornerstone for Texas sound. Going back T-Bone Walker on a Friday night, could shuffle all night.
It's probably the most fun tempo to play in.
When you grow up in Texas, you listen to the radio, you hear all these musics.
Country, Jesus.
Hillbilly, blues.
R&B.
It's all there.
All of this mixes together and overlaps. Texas is very large, so when you're driving across the state, it gets kind of lonely out there. And your radio is your link, you know. And they had the border stations on the other side in Mexico with 500,000 watts just blasting.
There was religious shows, and they would play 30 minutes of religious music, and then there would be a blues show, hillbillies. anything you wanted to listen to, and it would be coming through clear as a bell because of this tremendous power.
I heard it on the X.
But that was the glue that bound all through Texas, was these stations that were so loud that I think you could hear them in Chicago on a clear night.
It all plays in that mysterious role of influences. Bo Diddley's been an influence. Bo Diddley stands among a list that's a fairly lengthy one in terms of blues singers that have had a profound effect on what we do.
I think Velcro Fly would probably be the best example of Bo Diddley's influence on ZZ Top.
All of Bo Diddley's songs, the rhythm was such a strong factor, you know, and with us, we like to think the beat or the rhythm is a strong factor in a lot of our tunes. From Lightning Hopkins to Elvis Presley to the English groups like Cream, all these people had a sameness in my mind, you know. They had an energy, and the different styles didn't make that much difference to me.
Probably one of the biggest influences in the early days was Ginger Baker. I mean, you couldn't be a musician around Texas and not want to be like the Cream. I mean, it seemed like when that record came out, it was a totally new and different thing. It was blues and rock and roll, and it was driving, and it was three-piece, and it was everything that I wanted to do.
Texas and being influenced by the blues is one and the same, and you'd never get it out of you, you know. The old saying, you can take the boy out of Texas, but not the Texas out of the boy. You know, it's the same thing with the music influences.
The funny thing is, you bring all of these influences in, you bring them into this strange place called Texas, and it does something peculiar, and yet it's very identifiable. So it's interesting.
I grew up in Irving, which is a suburb of Dallas. Never really, you know, liked music, but never really thought about playing music until the Beatles did the Ed Sullivan Show. Saw that night and changed my life.
I was raised here in Houston, and some people choose a deck of cards. I chose 6 strings, and I attacked it. I just went for it, and it's still a great friend. It's a burden and a friend.
I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and I started singing about the age of 8 with my brother Rocky in front of the little bands that were playing these little beer joints. And I remember the reason I thought I turned professional at 8 is because they'd throw change on the table beside us. My brother was singing harmony, and I asked my mother who the money was for. She said, well, it's for you.
We started in Texas, then we gradually got into Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mexico. Just kind of grew like this. I mean, it took 3 years maybe for us to get across the Mason-Dixon line.
But in 72 or 73, we had the opportunity to play with the Rolling Stones in Hawaii. They asked us to play on the show, which blew us away. You know, we only had 2 albums out or something. And it was frightening because the Stones fans are so intent on just seeing them. And we wore cowboy hats and wore boots and jeans and played rock and roll, and people didn't do that back then. But we did well on those shows, and that gave us a pretty big boost.
Tres Hombres was the album that broke us nationally. That was our first album that sold 1 million copies, and so that was the album that established us.
Fandango was released as half live, half studio. And the one studio track, of course, that was getting a lot of attention was a song that we wrote in Florence, Alabama at a sound check called Tush.
I ain't asking for much. I said, Lord, take me downtown. I'm just looking for some touch.
Following the Worldwide Texas Tour, which was '76, Frank took off for the Caribbean. Dusty wound up in Mexico somewhere. I took off for Points Beyond. Just took off. But we returned in '79.
Well, we got back together. Billy's beard was getting very long, and so was mine. We didn't know about one another, you know.
And what started off as a disguise turned into now a tradition. One of our favorite tracks on Degüello was Cheap Sunglasses. The origin of that tune perhaps came from the fact that when you work 300 days a year and you're driving, a lot of times the morning hours are spent behind the wheel trying to make it to the next show. A pair of sunglasses, more than likely they would be picked up at a truck stop for not very much money. Will get you through that morning. We recommend them.
Go get yourself some cheap sunglasses.
In 1981, we did an album called El Loco. This was probably our first effort in using any sort of instrument other than guitar, bass, and drums and the horns that we'd played on Degüello.
You know, El Loco, we felt good about. You know, it felt good to spread our wings a little bit more, so to speak.
So that was kind of the threshold that we explored and went on into a little further with Eliminator.
We learned about video 6 months before our Eliminator album was being made. Frank had called me up. He says, man, there's a real interesting music show on. And 8 hours later, he called me back and he said, how long is this show? And of course, it was MTV, which was 24 hours long. And about a day later, we figured it out. That was really the first exposure to music video that we had.
So when we decided to do one, we went in with the same feeling as we do writing songs. You know, like, let's have some fun with this and let's see how it works. So we just jumped with both feet in the middle of it.
Billy had made the Eliminator car previous to our cutting of the record. So when the record came out, we decided to name it Eliminator. We've always loved cars. We've always, you know, in Texas, you got to have a good car. You got to go from here to there. It takes a long time. And so the cars was a natural. The girls was, you know, that was just bonus. I mean, our thinking was in the beginning to have a little story going on and let us participate but not participate. Let us be there, but let the girls be our hands. It wasn't until, I think, the Legs video came out, which kind of completed that first trilogy of Give Me All Your Lovin', Sharp Dressed Man, and Legs, that people started putting everything together and discovering what ZZ Top meant to ZZ Top. You know, it's a band that likes to play good music, have a good time, not take themselves too seriously.
My brain comes and won't unwind. Every day I swear against mine on a granite up women. Oh yeah. Granite up women. Oh yeah. Driving me insane. Driving me insane.
When we went to make the Recycler record, we had prepared a body of material that was fairly similar to Afterburner.
Where is that?
Oddly enough, the Recycler record had a lot of bluesy return to roots elements.
We got to the studio and our equipment was lagging behind a couple of days. We went up to Memphis early and found some instruments there that we could, you know, play on. So we set up a studio set of drums, and Billy found an old guitar somewhere, and we started playing a shuffle, of course. So we sat down and wrote My Head's in Mississippi.
One afternoon we had a break from the studio, and we piled in a car, drove down through the Delta, and stumbled across the Delta Blues Museum, went in, and happened to be there on a day that the director and an associate, Jim O'Neill, were paying a visit to the Muddy Waters cabin. Came back with a souvenir stick of wood and dropped it off back in Memphis at a guitar shop. Shortly thereafter, a bona fide piece of playable blues memorabilia was born, the Muddy Wood guitar. And it was the band's contribution, I guess, back to what we felt we had based a career on, this art form called the blues. Presently, the museum is still accepting contributions and donations, and they're building toward a time when they can more properly house the collections that they now possess. It's kind of an ongoing living museum. Being there in the Delta, you get to feel it as well. It's a real interesting experience.
On the Greatest Hits album, we individually picked some of our favorites. And then we had some that we felt, you know, were naturals to be on it. And we wanted a good variety. That plus the two new selections that we hadn't recorded previously, we thought was a good span of the years we've been through. Thank you very much.
Viva Las Vegas is not necessarily considered one of Elvis's most famous works, but it's certainly one that has a lot of glam and trash that appeal to us.
We started doing a song in the dressing room before the shows, and then it progressed to the sound checks stage, and then to the studio. We all love Elvis, you know, a lot, so it was easy to decide to do an Elvis song. When I was around 8 years old, I started singing Elvis Presley tunes, and my mother was a big Elvis Presley fan, right? So I've been working on Elvis' voice a long, long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, God knows he's worked on it for 30 years. I mean, he ought to sound like Elvis.
I've driven these guys crazy behind it. So I'd like to thank you very much. And my mama, too. Thank you. The thing is that people that listened to us early on, a great deal of them are still listening, you know. And the people that came on board around Eliminator, Afterburner, you know, they have their favorites, you know. So it makes for a real mixture in the audience.
ZZ Top's always been curious. If it's there and it's musical, we're going to try to experiment with it in some form or fashion.
The general feeling of the band is that we enjoy playing, first and foremost. That's what makes it click for us.
And the longer we've played together, the tighter that's gotten. So, you know, it's stronger now than it was before even. It's a very comfortable situation.